Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox, and welcome to Fox Talks. Today we're continuing our story on the culture wars and its effects on the media, and we're going to get into a topic that is definitely involved in having a negative influence on our ability to get truth from the news media in the modern day. But also, it's a bit of an outside issue, and it is also typically outside of the culture wars, and that is war. War itself.
But our nation has been in some sort of perpetual war since World War II, whether it be actual devastating boots on the ground conflicts such as the Korean War, Vietnam War, the various Middle East wars, the war in Afghanistan, or the non-combative yet highly expensive Cold War with the Soviets. We've been a nation constantly needing to flex our military might. Now that the war in Afghanistan is over-ish, our war drums can't help but to begin beating themselves in a new direction, further east. Now, essentially, the military-industrial complex needs to continue making money, and nothing could be more lucrative than a new Cold War with China. If you thought the war in Afghanistan was expensive, just wait until the foe we face isn't just a group of unsophisticated tribesmen in the Afghan mountains, but a developed nuclear nation with a population 4 to 5 times our size.
The Department of Homeland Security on February 7th issued a new bulletin, which is an update and a summary of the terrorist threat to the United States homeland. And inside is one of the most dystopian things I've ever seen, a full domestic war on terror. Let's put this up there on the screen.
Again, but you have shown no evidence to confirm that. And I'm going to get to the next question here, which is, what is the evidence that they play? I mean, this is like crisis actors, really? This is like Alex Jones territory you're getting into now. What evidence do you have to support the idea that there is some propaganda film in the making?
Matt, this is derived from information known to the U.S. government, intelligence information that we have declassified. I think you know.
Okay, well, where is it? Where is this information?
It is intelligence information that we have declassified.
Well, where is it? Where's the declassified information?
I just delivered it.
Let's just address the claims that China's ramping up aggressions by flying its jets in Taiwan's airspace. Take a look at this map. The orange lines are the Chinese flights Taiwan is talking about. The light blue shaded area around Taiwan is their actual airspace. And as you can see, the orange lines are not in that shaded area. So what are all of these reports referring to? Well, they're referring to an area titled the ADIZ, the Air Defense Identification Zone. And that zone is the blue dotted line that creates this rectangle, much of which actually goes right over mainland China. You can see that. The ADIZ zone was created by the U.S., actually, and is not internationally recognized as actual airspace. And the point of this drawn zone is to allow countries the right to monitor all aircraft in the area to catch unwanted threats that may head toward the country.
No, you made a series of allegations and statements.
Would you like us to print out the topper? Because you will see a transcript of this briefing that you can print out for yourself.
That's not evidence, Ned. That's you saying it. That's not evidence. I'm sorry.
What would you like, Matt?
I would like to see some proof that you can show that
Matt, you have been
that shows that the Russians are doing this. Ned, I've been doing this for a long time.
I know, that was my point. You have been doing this for quite a while. You know that when we declassify intelligence information,
right. And
we do so in a means we do so with an eye to protecting sources and methods.
Is not going to fall. I remember a lot of things. So where is the declassified information other than you coming out here and saying?
And look, let's take it as, far as we can. When the CIA spokesperson, State Department, tells us that they have intelligence that the Russians are planning some Alex Jones false flag information, and we don't believe them and we laugh at them here on our show, is that an act of terrorism by sowing discord and undermining public trust in the U.S. government? I mean, under their definition, yeah, that is.
Is that enough to put us on a list and subject our communications to surveillance and all of that?
Can they subpoena our communications? I mean, look, I know I may sound paranoid, but this is for real. And actually, this is also how it works in many other countries. So do not underestimate that this could ever get this far.
This is where we're headed. But we can only head that way if the American people consent to it. Now, this is where Taiwan and the Uyghurs come in. The players in Washington know the right strings to pull to get the American people to buy into war. It's a little different for the left and the right, but you can easily figure out the trigger points. For the left, it's human rights abuses. The war lobby knows if they use buzzwords like genocide or sexual abuse, people on the left will begin to not only agree with, but demand some sort of military intervention.
Matt, I'm sorry you don't like the format, but we have declassified.
It's not the format; it's the content.
I'm sorry you don't like the content. I'm sorry you are doubting the information that is in the possession of the U.S. government.
No,
what I'm telling you is that this is information that's available to us. We are making it available to you in order for a couple reasons. One is to attempt to deter the Russians from going ahead with this activity. Two, in the event we're not able to do that, in the event the Russians do go ahead with this, to make it clear as day, to lay bare the fact that this has always been an attempt on the part of the Russian Federation to fabricate a pretext.
Yeah, but you don't have any evidence to back it up other than what you're saying. It's like you're saying, we think we have information the Russians may do this, but you won't tell us what the information is. And then when you're asked...
That is the idea behind deterrence, Matt. That is the idea behind deterrence.
And when
it is our hope that the Russians don't go forward with this.
Is, you say, I just gave it to you. But that's not what...
You seem not to understand. You seem not to understand the idea of deterrence. We are trying to deter the Russians from moving forward with this type of activity. That is why we're making it public today. If the Russians don't go forward with this, that is not ipso facto an indication that they never had plans to do so.
But then it's unprovable. I mean, my God. What is the evidence that you have that suggests that the Russians are even planning this?
Matt,
I'm not saying that they're not, but you just come out and say this and expect us just to believe it without you showing a shred of evidence that it's actually true. Other than when I ask, or when anyone else asked, what's the information? You said, well, I just gave it to you, which was just you making a statement.
Matt, you said yourself, you've been in this business for quite a long time. You know that when we make information, intelligence information public, we do so in a way that protects sensitive sources and methods. You also know that we declassify information only when we're confident in that information. If you doubt the credibility of the U.S. government, of the British government, of other governments, and want to, find solace in information that the Russians are putting out, that is for you to do.
The military-industrial complex in general, and of all the topics, all the negative influences on media that I will be talking about over the series, this is probably the one that I've covered the most on this channel already, but I would also like to point you in some other directions as well. So for one, Renegade Cut has a really excellent video on the military-industrial complex and its interactions with the film industry. You could also talk about its interactions with the video game industry as well. And all of these ways that it provides these huge budgets for blockbuster entertainment that glorifies the American military and war in general. And war is a topic that I have covered many times on this channel as well. Although, come to think of it, probably my favorite video that I've done on war was not allowed on YouTube and can only be found on my BitChute channel. So check that out. There will be a link for both of those things in the description. And if I don't remember, you can just bug me in the comments, I'm sure. Let's see, where else? But there's also, and I may have referenced this in a previous video, and I may throw a clip in here of this, specifically what I'm referencing, but, the stories about why we should be pushing for a war in Ukraine, or, why we should be kind of accelerating that, why, this... Because our media, in addition to the way that, our military figures are speaking in our media and what they're saying, and the way that our pundits are addressing everyone who comes on about these things, we were certainly making even the president of Ukraine right now very uncomfortable that we are going to start something where currently he doesn't believe that there is anything, or something maybe far off at the very least. And as I was saying in Indoctrination and Division, we always, when we are exiting from a war, we need something to keep our military-industrial complex satiated. It is a blood machine that runs on human death. And to keep this country humming along, we have to keep pumping in the bodies somehow. And I referenced this in my fear that this would be a war on the public in some way. You know, like the war on drugs brought us over-militarized SWAT teams. After the Prevention of Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Act in 2007, we saw bills being passed that would give local police departments access to kind of this federal budget that would give them a certain amount of money that they could spend with their defense contractors to buy military equipment that they thought that they needed. And this issue, and many like it, have been covered by John Oliver on Last Week Tonight. So you probably are pretty aware of that, but that kind of cropped up in this age that started with that act in 2007 and started with this fear that some point over his term, the first 4 years or 8, that Obama would finally make good on his promise of ending the war. It was kind of a way of hedging bets. However, you know, the way that we are fighting this war on the home front does require arming an equal number, if not greater number, of people across the nation than it does to just start a war in one little country. And also you have the constant defense of military bases. So I guess we have another option, is find a way to start up new military bases. Like maybe putting another one in Ukraine. Oh wait, we're trying to do that. Oh, I see how this is going. So basically, we, to not crash our economy, I guess, because it's, when you look at how much like the government budget is, like the defense industry takes up a massive amount of that budget. And, when you look at the kind of money that they're making, or like, some people will remember this deal that was made during the Trump administration. It was right after Khashoggi was murdered, and this was with Saudi Arabia, and we were selling them weapons, and the logic was that if we didn't sell them weapons, Putin would, and you didn't want to let Putin win. So there's all sorts of like little proxies or like international arms dealing that we do that also props these companies up. So basically they've got to keep stonks going up just like every other company does. That is the underlying flaw of capitalism. That was what drove that was kind of the thing that drove colonialism. That was the thing that drove our kind of neo-colonial era, where we were just putting military bases everywhere and kind of expanding. And now the whole world has been expanded too. We have military bases almost everywhere. Do we expand this expansion to space and just fill it with strip malls or whatever the hell the plan is? We ran out of things to invest in, and now we have NFTs, which are arguably just a receipt that are just selling for these obscene amounts of money to people who have obscene amounts of money. And on one hand, you can't feel too bad because it's the rich being ripped off this time. We're used to it being the poor being ripped off in mass, but now, well, I mean, they get a lot of people behind some of these like Bitcoin rug pulls and stuff. So, they are ripping the rich off in mass too, collectively. But at the same time, that's just concentrating wealth into the hands of scammers and creating a new elite class of con men. I don't think that bodes well either, because then you have con men who have enough money to write the rules of the system. You've got like a lot more Donald Trumps in power all of a sudden. I don't think that's the way we want to go. But that's the thing. Like, you can't always keep expanding. Like, Facebook is running into this problem right now with with the news that they're not getting any many new users like that. And yeah, I know Facebook hasn't gotten everybody in the world to use it yet, but a lot of people do, like, at some point, and even if they didn't, like, this model of capitalism, this insistence that everything must always continue to grow so that the stockholders can continue to make money purely because they have money to first invest. So do no work other than park the hoarded assets that you have already acquired and never work again. And we are subsidizing this kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, this work freedom program for them, where they don't have to work and they get all the freedom they can buy, by insisting that stock prices always go up, that everything must always go up, and suddenly it's... But, like, how do you expect Facebook to continue to expand? Almost everybody, like, who hasn't heard of it yet? You know, they're gonna have to do a lot to change people's minds after all the bullshit they've put Facebook users through, and our country, and other countries that are experiencing genocides that are being pushed on Facebook. You know, it's they had to stop growing at some point, and that's weird, right? You know. And everything is like that under capitalism, including war. So, while the idea of ending a war sounds great, it's kind of like squeezing a balloon, right? You can't necessarily make the balloon smaller by squeezing it, right? You're just gonna, like, make it smaller here, where your hand is, and bigger here or here, right? That's kind of the nature of war, and then you add in that 3% growth, though. So if we end war in one country, then there's about a country's worth of war that needs to happen, plus a 3% on the total amount of war that we're doing, that has to happen. Or at least, if not war, I mean, we don't necessarily have to fire the bullets or the missiles, but we do have to buy them. We have to have a reason to buy them, I guess. Demand for war, let's say. Demand for the weapons of war. At its most direct, demand for the weapons of war must go up by 3% every year. So ending wars just isn't profitable. And because, especially since World War II, where we finally stabilized our economy after capitalism's first huge crisis in America, we stabilized it through war production. And I think that we learned the wrong lesson, and I think that that's why no matter what presidents say when they're campaigning for office, once they get in, I have the feeling somebody sits them down and they're like, look, this is the defense, this is the GDP, right? This is the defense industry, okay? This is the war. If you end the war, the stock market will immediately fall by at least 12%. No. Our GDP will fall by at least 12, maybe 15 to 20%. The shock of that could drive the stock market down even further. And maybe you think that's worth it to end a war, Mr. President. But I guarantee you will not be reelected. So, end the war if you want. I mean, you can say whatever you want, just as long as you don't do it. I really feel like that happens. You know what I mean? Like, there is just somebody like, look, we don't usually like to brag about this, but the military-industrial complex in this country is kind of a big deal. And you're going to have to find somebody to sell those guns to if you win this war. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but you're going to have to find people to buy a lot of guns. And, you know, this also ties into the CIA and the FBI and all of their little, like, coups that they fund. in other places in the world and militias that we arm.
So you're in the market to take over a country, to liberate its people, and to exploit its natural resources, steal its money, or just to earn the title of the world's newest dictator. There are a lot of benefits that come from launching a coup d'etat. And you're not alone. For decades, global superpowers like the US have gone crazy with coups and rigged elections to get the people they wanted in power. In the 42 years of the Cold War, from 1947 to 1989, America was involved in at least 70 attempts to overthrow governments. That is almost 2 a year. And the organization tasked with carrying out these operations? Our good friends at the CIA. They were so obsessed with overthrowing governments that they even released books like the Manual for Psychological Operations in Guerrilla Warfare and the CIA Manual for Trickery and Deception. That way their agents could learn the best way to get their unwanted leader out and the dictator of the day in. Sure, these coups often created worse leaders, but it was for the good of America, so it was worth it, right?
On August 18th, 2020, soldiers in Mali toppled President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, sparking a wave of military coups across Africa. Last April, a military council in Chad seized power following the death of Chad's longtime president, Idriss Déby. Then on May 24th, 2021, Mali witnessed its second coup in a year. On September 5th, the armed forces of Guinea captured the nation's president and dissolved Guinea's government and constitution. Then on October 25th, Sudan's military seized power and put Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok under house arrest, ending a push in Sudan towards civilian rule. And finally, 2 weeks ago, on January 23rd, Burkina Faso's army leaders, led by a U.S.-trained commander, deposed the nation's president, suspended the constitution, and dissolved parliament. That's 6 coups in 5 African countries in just under a year and a half. Many of the coups have been led by military officers who have received U.S. training. Those U.S. officers. The Intercept recently reported U.S.-trained officers have attempted at least 9 coups and succeeded in at least 8 across 5 West African countries since 2008, including Burkina Faso 3 times, Guinea, Mali 3 times, Mauritania, and the Gambia.
Commanders in some of these coups, especially thinking about Mali and Burkina Faso, were trained by the U.S. and in some cases also France. So these kind of external investments in the security sector effectively harden certain sectors of the state to the detriment of democratic governance.
If you can give us the overall picture of this area when it comes to militarism and particularly the U.S. involvement in terms of training the officers involved in these coups. I mean, it really is astounding. In the last 18 months, we have seen this number of coups. In no time in the last 20 years have we seen this number of coups across Africa in this amount of time.
I think you're absolutely right. We do need to ask about the broader geopolitical context that has emboldened these military officers to take such brash actions. Between the US-led war on terror and the wider international community's fixation with quote-unquote security, this is a context that centers, if not privileges, military solutions to political problems. I think there's a tendency in the mainstream news outlets reporting about the recent coups to place external players outside the frame of analysis. But when you factor in the growing role of the U.S. Military Command for Africa, which is otherwise known as AFRICOM, it becomes clear that it would be a mistake to interpret the events in these countries as the product of internal political tensions alone.
In the 1980s, as a way of fighting Russia, we armed a group of people in Afghanistan. Little known group. At the time, wait, actually I don't know when they might have been Al-Qaeda at the time. They may have changed their name afterwards. My point is, Osama bin Laden. To the tune of, I think it was like $3.5 billion a year in terms of military aid and stuff that we provided to Osama bin Laden in the late 1980s in order to get him to use guerrilla warfare against the Russians. And it was pretty effective. I mean, Russia did not have success getting into Afghanistan, that's for sure. So it was moderately successful, but after the Soviet Union fell, we no longer had a reason to to arm rebels. So the money quit coming in, and again, this money largely being used to buy arms from our arms dealers, represents an injection of cash indirectly into the military-industrial complex by just gunning up that need for war and saying, hey, buy your weapons from us. And, within a couple of years, the Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden and his group of terrorists decided to drive 2 trucks into the World Trade Center and detonate them in the basement. And they were trying to do this as a way of scaring the president into sending money again. And there was just no way that we were going to do that. But, Bill Clinton definitely didn't. So he just said, okay, well, we'll turn this into a war then. And, the military-industrial complex found another way to sink billions of dollars into Osama bin Laden. And, that's by the whole Gulf War. Actually, no, that was about Saddam. How did we respond to Osama bin Laden bombing the World Trade Center in '92? I mean, obviously a little bit before my time. Not necessarily a thing I've studied. Anyways, where one war ends, another war opens. Basically, a war of some kind, or some opportunity to sell weapons to someone, because that's what we need. And like, war is an industry that our government would naturally entangle itself with, because, the government, at least in this country, are the people who declare war. I mean, we certainly have mercenaries and vigilantes that, vigilantes? What? No, we definitely have some serious mercenary groups in this country that are deployed all over the world and hired by, all sorts of groups, and do coups in all sorts of places that may or may not be taking orders from some central U.S. agency, but although, like, what was it, Blackwater, which is now, I think, Academy, because they changed their name because of all the bad PR. So back in the day, Blackwater was very heavily involved in what we were doing in the Middle East, and we were paying them. But, they also, groups like that also act independent of the U.S. government and just kill people for money internationally. Yeah, we do that too. So my point is, and maybe this is kind of an interesting take on this. I hope somebody thinks this is a good idea. But what if we nationalized the military-industrial complex? Said, if the government has the ability to declare war, then they should also have the ability to create the weapons of war independently, without a third party or interest. And then run that shit like you do the post office. Well, not quite like we do the post office. That would be awkward. But, run it, basically for almost no profit. And you know what? We're America. If we believe half of the bullshit that we say about ourselves, we can find a way to innovate ourselves around a dependence on war. And, I say all of this because those investors, hedge fund owners that are all invested in these companies, the people sitting on the boards of these companies, our generals who are being promised seats on boards of these companies when they retire, if they say the right things on TV, those kinds of things. These people are all over CNN. They get the first crack at being the authoritative version of every story. One example of this is the bombing, the drone strike that was done during the Biden administration. And one thing I want to give Biden credit for is, there've been less drone strikes, we think. He still hasn't repealed the Trump era policy on not reporting drone strikes, but as far as we're aware, he's cracked down. We could be very wrong about that. I do want to point that out. But we think that he has has at least slowed down. But now, through the New York Times, we actually have footage of a humanitarian aid worker and 10 children that crowded around his car, presumably. I mean, he was carrying large bottles of water in the desert. I guess the kids were thirsty, so they crowded around his car to get a drink of water, and then a drone blew them all up. 1 man, 10 children. And immediately, the mainstream media had generals and contractors and all sorts of stuff, just the usual cast of warmongers, on to say how they had credible information that this was a terrorist and that it wasn't actually water that you could see in the videos. It was actually like explosives or something, and they just made up this whole bullshit story to get you to disregard the fact that even if all of that was true, even if this guy was a terrorist, you still killed 10 children. You like, what kind of a terrorist act could he have committed with those explosives that would have been worse than killing those 10 children even? Like, no way you go about it was that a good story. The only thing that is good is the only story like that after 2 presidents who ramped up the drone war. But it's also a perfect example of how these interests within the military-industrial complex. And like, look, here's another thing. And this cuts to the core of a lot of some classist shit that happens, and a lot of defense of these big-moneyed interests and, you know, anything that we have to do to make stonks go up, attitudes from our media, is that a lot of these pundits are fucking millionaires. Like, they probably own shares of some of this stuff. And you gotta think, like, if you're in the news industry and you're getting the news every day and you're really following some of this stuff, you might be able to make some good stock picks. And if you're a millionaire, you probably make stock picks, so... And then you might get the opportunity to tell a story a certain way that might make those stocks go up. Well, and you know, you would think that would be a conflict of interest, much the way it is for Congress, which is, you know, we need to stop letting them trade stocks as well, because that is too easy and obvious a way for corruption to spread. Like, all you gotta do is bomb some of that stock, and all of a sudden, it's in their interest to make that price go up. I mean, obviously you can't buy a Cinder stock, but like, buy my stock. Help me out. There is certainly corruption there. So, you know, it's the same thing that we see like in a lot of these police-involved shootings. The first source that we get on what happened is the cops. And this is after they've had time to, you know, collaborate behind the scenes and get their story straight before they come to the media with it. And then they tell you their version. And, you know, there are times, yeah. And, you know, it's just the same thing, but a much more sinister institution. And, like, the Lockheed Martin story really gets me because, yeah, that's so blatant. Like, you just... But it's so true. And, like, a lot of that shit happens behind the scenes. It's the thing about that story that makes it surprising isn't that Lockheed Martin paid for it. It's that they had their name on it. You know? A lot of that native advertising type stuff. Wink, wink, native advertising type stuff. You know, it doesn't usually hint that it is, in fact, an ad. And this doesn't necessarily like say it's an ad, but if it was paid for by Lockheed Martin, it's put there to make their stonks go up, believe me.